Did you know you can just make Game Boy games? There's this amazing piece of software called GBStudio that makes it really easy. Now, I'm not saying it's really easy to make good Game Boy games. Making a good video game is quite hard and takes a lot of work. No piece of software is really going to change that, but GBStudio makes it really easy to get started playing around with things. My goal with this video is to kind of give you a friendly introduction to GBStudio, to show you how easy it is to start getting your feet wet. It's not intended to be a tutorial for all the amazing features that GBStudio has, because GBStudio is a very powerful piece of software. It's very deep. And if you want a nice place to start digging into some of the GBStudio features and how to get things done, there's this cool website called GBStudio Central that has a lot of great articles about building games using GBStudio. They even have a print magazine, which is amazing. Really, there's no better time to get started with Game Boy game development. So let's get started with that introduction to GBStudio. This is GBStudio. When we start it up, we have the option of creating a new game from one of three templates. The first is the new sample project, which gives you a starter GBC game, showing off a lot of Game Boy Studio's features like a top-down game, platformer, point-and-click levels, and shoot 'em up. There's also the original sample project, which is a little top-down RPG style game. And finally, there's a blank project. So let's see what the sample project looks like. And you can see it creates a whole lot of stuff for you, which is really quite neat. And you can go up here and press the run button and wait a little bit for it to kind of build everything. And that'll give you an emulator with this game in it. Taking longer than I thought it would. There you go. Now you have a game. And you can move around. You can jump. And if you want, you can export it as a ROM, and then play it on an emulator, or even put it onto a flash cartridge and play it on actual hardware. So let's start over from a new project and see kind of how this works. We're going to use a blank project. And as you can see, a blank project is blank. There's nothing here. We're going to start with a new scene, pressing this plus button, and start it here. And we're going to need a background. Right now, it's just this placeholder background. If we were to play it, well, let's play it and see what happens. As you can see, we have this little placeholder background. We have an arrow, and it moves around. Or we can move it around. That's our player character. And that's pretty neat. But we want to do better. So we can go into the directory where GBStudio created the game files for this, and we can go into the assets directory and the background. Now I had prepared this background image. It's from one of my previous videos. You may recognize it. It's a little courtyard scene. And since I put it into the backgrounds directory of in the game files, I can reload assets. And now I can select this scene and change the background to be the one I want. And this background is 32 by 32 tiles big, which is bigger than the Game Boy screen. So when you play this, it will scroll around. So let's have a look. And there we are. We have my background. We have the arrow. Now, of course, the background's just a picture. There's no collision detection. Let's add in some collision detection. And here on the scene editor, we have the collision button, and we can just paint in collision areas for just all around. So what if I put a collision bottom here? I don't know what that does. All right, well, this will give us an idea. All right, so let's see what this looks like. All right, now I can't, well, I can still walk into those. I guess that makes sense. What does this one do? Ooh, oh, I see. All right, so those collision bottom ones means I can climb over. Okay, let's switch those to normal collision. All right. And this little arrow is our player character, and it's where the player starts. So we can actually move that around. I'm going to put that in the center. And maybe we don't want it to be an arrow. Maybe we want an actual sprite. So I'm going to take one of these sprites from the demo project. I'm going to take the player, and I'm going to put it into the sprites directory. Now I'll reload the assets again and click on the actor and click player. Now if we run this, we can see we have a player, and it actually even animates, which is pretty neat. Now, of course, there's more things we can do. We can put in a trigger down there. And what this will do, what I want to do with this is an event called change scene. And I'm just going to have it be the same scene. And I'm going to have the player come into the scene basically right here. So now what I'm doing is if the player walks out that door at the bottom of the scene, they'll just come back into the scene from the, as though they're re-entering the room, I guess. So let's have a look at that. And, well, I guess I still have the collision. Boop, boop. No, it's not working. Why not work? I did still have the collision. Neat. And if I want, I can change this so that the character is pointing up. There. That's pretty neat. All right, next thing. I'm going to steal another sprite sheet, this NPC01, and paste. And I can add in another actor over here. I'll give it the NPC01, and I can have some dialogue for this actor. Very good. Let's see how that looks. Hello. There, it works. And now we can take this game, and export it as a ROM. and copy it over to a flash card and play it on an actual Game Boy, which I think is really neat. Now, I didn't really cover a lot of the functionality and features of GBStudio, but I think this really gives you a core place to start, and really lets you kind of explore things from here. You can get started with some simple top-down RPG style gameplay, just some dialogues, I guess, to start with. One thing I've always wanted to do with this is make some custom Christmas cards for my friends, and put them onto cartridges and give them out. And of course, you can also just make really super highly customized games for your friends if you want. Like if you want to have a special message for someone, you can make that with GBStudio. So really, it opens up this possibility of all sorts of neat things you can do. And I personally think GBStudio is an absolutely amazing piece of software. Oh, one thing I didn't mention is it's how GBStudio works. It's actually running a virtual machine on the Game Boy, which just completely blows my mind. If you had asked me if such a thing was possible before I knew about GBStudio, I would have said don't even bother trying to build a virtual machine for the Game Boy. It's just it feels like it should be way too inefficient. And yet GBStudio works. There are obviously limitations on performance, but I think that's more than made up for the ease of actually getting started with Game Boy development. And frankly, I'm just so happy that this software exists. I hope if you didn't already know about GBStudio, that this maybe gives you the push to kind of start exploring the world of making Game Boy games and making custom ROMs. And I hope you're as excited about it as I am. Thanks. Bye.